Hello, A Taste of AZ listeners. I am Luke Irvin, and I'm your host today. And we are here on the corner, basically, of Scottsdale Road and Shea, a little bit into that complex, right by Shea 14 movie theater. And we are here at a very cool spot that I've never been to before. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself and where we are?
Absolutely. So you're currently at JL Patisserie, and I'm Jenna Lorquin.
And I'm going to get it off my chest right now and apologize. I'm probably going to pronounce several things wrong throughout the podcast. So this will not only be an educational experience for our listeners, but me as well. So with that said, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Belgium, born in Barcelona, but raised in Belgium. And I grew up doing a lot of sports, including golf, which landed me a scholarship for Boise State. Okay. So I played for BSU for 4 years.
Nice.
It was awesome. So much fun. And I was on the golf team. And upon graduating at Boise State, I decided I wanted to become a pastry chef. So I moved back home to Europe, to France specifically, and I did Cordon Bleu in Paris.
Okay.
And became a pastry chef. I had my own consulting company back in Belgium and worked there for a few months. And then...
So I'm curious, what were you going to school for?
At Boise State?
At Boise State.
So I double majored in international business and accounting finance.
Okay. And throughout this time, were you making pastries and things like that? Or is that something
for fun?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I was super busy because our golf schedule was crazy.
Yeah.
And school and double majoring and, international business group and that kind of stuff. But I would go home and I would bake for fun and do cakes for my teams and that kind of stuff. I just really loved baking.
And so, it sounds like you really loved golf and all that and whatnot, but was like, when you think back on it, and maybe even it's this way today, was that kind of what you loved doing most, was baking?
I wouldn't say most.
Okay.
But I really loved it because it was one way for me to just disconnect and relax and do my thing, and without expectation. That was the one thing that didn't really, your cake didn't turn out great, whatever. But it was that time sometimes where I was really stressed with certain finals or certain, golf scores, outcomes, and that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, I just need to bake and just do something with my hands.
Yeah.
And kind of disconnect from a result or an outcome and just do something for me. And so I love studying. I love school. I love golfing. I wouldn't say I love pastry more than any other activity that I was involved in. I just think it was kind of an escape for me, and I really appreciated that.
Well, it's interesting because I miss playing sports in high school. And that you kind of get in a flow state as well. But like you're saying, there is an expectation. You want to excel, and having something that you can be creative, work with your hands, and just kind of get in a zone, but not have to worry about that. That's like a very freeing thing to be able to personally develop. And so I'm curious, when did that start?
Baking, I would say early on in my life, just because I baked with my mom a lot.
Okay.
My mom was an exchange student when she was younger, and she brought back an American cooking book, which we didn't really do in Europe. So she would make carrot cake, which nobody knew about. She would make cookies and that kind of stuff, which is like true American stuff. And we just loved it. And then you have bakeries, every corner. On your way to school, on your way to wherever you're going, there's just bakeries everywhere. So it's been really part of my culture growing up, part of my memories, part of any gathering that we had with my family or event or birthday or whatever. It involved some sort of dessert, pastries. And so I wouldn't say that I was like as much of a professionally baking early on, but I would say I was very hands-on in the kitchen from a very young age. Yeah.
Well, and obviously patisserie being a French thing, I've never been to Europe before, but from what I understand, it's much more of a cultural thing to begin your day off with the pastry or something like that, whereas in America, the cuisine is very, very different. You look at places like IHOP that are serving like 2-pound omelets or whatever they are. But
you have Krispy Kreme, which is a donut.
Sure, yeah.
Right.
But, you know, you don't see places doing it like you're doing on every corner, whereas in France and parts of Europe all over, I figured that's much more of a commonplace thing.
Absolutely. And especially on the weekend.
Okay.
You know, the parents go get some pastries, go home, and then everyone's at home on Sunday, and we all having pastries and that kind of stuff on the way back from school. You're walking home. You probably walk by like 3 or 4 just to get home from school. I mean, come on. You tell me that you're not going to stop at least at one of them and get, you know, a little eclair or something. So yeah, it's definitely part of the culture to like have it a lot more frequently than we do here.
Well, and you know, it's interesting as well that you not only had the exposure to the more European, specifically French style of, you know, baking, but also having your mom have brought home that cookbook and have the, you know, the introduction of kind of more American baking into your life. That must have brought kind of a unique perspective. Did you walk into places and you would make things at home, but you couldn't necessarily find them in bakeries in France or wherever you might have been? Yeah,
like carrot cake. Like nobody knew carrot cake.
Really?
And I would want that every birthday.
Yeah.
That was like my favorite cake in the entire world. And then all the kids, of course, because it's not part of our culture, you like carrot cake, like, you vegetables, we don't like vegetables, but it's like, this is the best cake in the world. So I thought that was super cool. And then we'd take trips to America for vacation and literally would bring back an entire suitcase of chocolate chips.
Oh, really?
Like morsels and like butterscotch, and like, because they wouldn't sell the Nestle one, they wouldn't even sell it in Europe. So we would literally have a suitcase of like toffee, you know, chocolate chips.
That's awesome.
Like, it was so good.
I wonder how many like airplane TSA agents would see those going back and kind of just want to grab a few bags out of them for inspection purposes.
I think they were probably like, that's odd, but sure, you know, whatever. And like, this is what you bring back from America. Like, okay. So, but it was cool. Yeah. I mean, nobody really made cookies the way my mom did and that kind of stuff. It's just because we had the products to do it. It was really, really cool. And I was like, wow, we can do all of this. Like, there's so limitless of good pastries that you can have. It's so cool.
So remind me where you were born again.
I was born in Barcelona, but I moved to Belgium when I was about 5 or 6 years old. So I identify myself Belgian just because that's where I grew up and that's kind of the culture that I...
And you were in Belgium until you came to the United States for college?
At 17.
Okay, and then was it directly after college that you moved to France?
It was, yes.
And how long were you there for?
So in France, I was there for a year.
Okay.
And then I was in Belgium another year after that.
Excuse me, taking a sip of water. And so when you're in France, you were studying baking the whole time, right?
So I did a double program.
Okay.
So at Cordon Bleu, you can do both the pastry part or the savory part, which is called cuisine.
Okay.
And I did both. So I am trained as a cuisine chef as well.
Okay. And so what was it that made you choose specifically baking, or was that something you had decided before you even attended
I already knew.
Okay.
I already knew pastry was what I wanted to do. I just love the precision of pastry. I love the scaling. I love the methodic. I love the science behind it. I love cooking too. I knew it wasn't going to be specifically at that point in time my devoted career, although I knew maybe at some point that would really maybe come back.
Sure.
But I knew knowing more cuisine was going to make me a better pastry chef.
Absolutely.
And I'm very glad I did both program combined, because it's the amount of information, knowledge, skills that are acquired from doing cuisine simultaneously was far beyond what I could have gained from doing pastry only. And also my approach to certain food and certain seasoning was really broadened. So like usually pastry, they're like, okay, it's 1 cup of flour, and you don't question it. You're like, great, I'm making jam, put 1 cup of flour or 1 cup of sugar or whatever. But with cuisine, they're like, well, did you taste it? Is it not already sweet? Because strawberries are in season now, or they're not. And so if they're already sweet, why do you need to put so much sugar? You know, and then you kind of season as you go. Versus in pastry, a lot of the times I feel like it's not really questioned. It's just kind of like, that's the recipe, let's go.
Sure.
But in cuisine, I would always have questions on like, how much butter are you taking? And they're like, well, enough for this size of fish. And I'm like, well, how much weight is your fish and how much butter are you putting for it? They're like, well, this fish looks pretty fatty, feels pretty fatty, so I'm going to cut the butter a little bit. And I'm like, that makes sense, but how much butter did you use? You know, because I like this kind of precision, but at the same time, I'm like, I do acknowledge the importance of actually looking what you work with, tasting what you work with, and kind of adjust your recipe accordingly, and not just be like 1 cup of sugar, let's go, you know, and just be like,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that part of the cuisine, and I love cooking, just me as an individual. I love cooking, and I love working with the products, and I think I learned incredible skills doing cuisine simultaneously that it helped me become a better chef and a better pastry chef. Yeah.
So I wouldn't personally identify myself as a creative person. I would say I'm much more analytical, but how I try and be creative is kind of what you're describing, understanding all of the mechanisms behind it and how to be precise, and kind of letting the creativity flow out of that. Because for me personally, it's hard to be creative with anything if I don't understand how the entire thing is working.
Right.
But if I understand, for instance, if I'm designing a spread of our magazine, if I know, okay, I can change the font, I can change the size of it, I can change the boldness, and understand all those components, that kind of gives me a roadmap to create something that looks and appears as creative, and of course uses some creativity, but at the same time is a very precise set of directions that I follow to generate a magazine spread or a photo, whatever it may be. I'm curious, do you identify as more of a creative or an analytical, or do you kind of fall in the middle of those two? Because it sounds like you have both of those parts of your brain working.
I think I'm analytical. I really like structure. Plus, I studied accounting.
Sure.
Too. So you can already see I was already pretty structured in the way I think. And I like to break down. So I like the creative part where I'm like, I would love to have this be made. So that's where I have just an idea. But then instead of being kind of throwing things in the air and be like, let's see where we land, I like to be like, this is my creative idea. Now let's break it down with specific analytical steps and then build this, right?
Sure.
So even though I believe I have some creative ideas of things that I want to make that are super cool, once I have them, I need to completely restructure them.
Sure.
So if I were to pick up a Canva, and I would imagine what I want to paint, once I decide what I wanted to paint, I'd actually be really structured in the way I paint.
Sure.
I wouldn't just suddenly be like, let's throw some pink now, it's just yeah.
Well, and that's why even people who are more creative in that sense, I think they are intuitively running through the same thing that you and I do, where they know all these different components from doing it so many times, but maybe don't sit down and really think through it as I don't want to say thoughtfully, but they don't get in as deep into a plan and just kind of jump into the execution side of things.
Right.
So circling back, you studied at Le Cordon Bleu. Where do you go next?
I have my consulting company in Belgium, and then I was working as a consultant for local bakeries and stuff like that for a year. And then my husband is from Prescott, okay. Arizona, and we met playing golf at Boise State.
Okay.
So we're both on the golf team at Boise State, stayed in a relationship, and then he wanted to relocate in Arizona. So we both moved here, and I was the head pastry chef at Silverly for 2 years.
Okay.
So.
And had you been to Arizona or anywhere outside? Okay, you had.
Yeah, so I had visited him for a more relationship at Boise State. So
sure.
And then I had a few golf tournaments when I was at Boise State down here. So I had been to Arizona, yeah.
And so was going to college and visiting, was that a big culture shock? Or kind of having bounced around Europe, I'm sure, were you used to visiting new places and digging into that side of things?
So 2 things. I think, do you mean the culture shock of visiting or the culture shock of America?
Just
bouncing
America
around, I don't mind because I'm very familiar with that. So I traveled so much for everything that I've either golf or personally or whatever. I used to go to America with my family when I was younger. I would travel a lot internationally for golf at a young age by myself, just totally cool with it. I think traveling and visiting and be like, wow, America's so great, and actually living in it
Sure.
is a bit more of a different shock, right?
Sure. So to kind of rephrase my question, let me put it this way. Now that I'm aware that you had visited more than I realized, you had experienced America somewhat before, but once you finally made the push to move here, and you did that a little bit, obviously, for college as well. Was that a major culture shock for you then?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that like, is it the food side of things? Is it, learning the language, or maybe that's something you had developed beforehand? What was the most surprising thing about college and then later on moving here?
Well, first was when I went visit America when I was younger with my family. We'd go to like big city, right? We went to Orlando, we went to California. So it was like this whole kind of like vacation vibe. And I signed up for Boise State, which I didn't know exactly where it was, but I was like, sounds good. And I was only 17 at the time. So here I am at the airport with just my golf bag and one suitcase. And I'm like, bye, Mom. See you in a year. And he's just like bowling at the airport. And I'm just like, this is going to be so great. This is my dream, the American dream. Let's go. And one of my layover was in Seattle, and the flight from Seattle to Boise is a pretty short flight. But I don't know, for some reason that airplane was like, I'm not joking, like maybe 14 seats at most. Like it was the smallest airplane I've ever been on. And the flight is pretty bumpy. There's a lot of turbulences.
Okay.
And so I remember being on that flight with like a ton of turbulence for 2 hours over nothing. There's like there's no town, there's nothing in between Seattle and Boise. It's just like mountains and nothing. And looking, over the window, and I'm just being like, what did I sign up for? Like, this is crazy. I'm moving to this place that I signed up a full ride for, that I don't even know where I'm going. And I just remember landing and like just being like completely shocked that I was just like, I don't know where I am, So that was the very first moment where I was like, I actually don't, because I saw a lot of pictures and I saw videos and what to do
where
in
they're
Boise,
trying to make it look cool and exciting.
Right. And then you land and you're like, oh, it's not as green as I thought, or there's no snow in the mountains, and it's like, well, it's August, like and just like you had this idea of what it was going to be, but then you actually land and you're like, I have no idea where I am. I don't know anybody. My family's back home, and you just have this like moment where you're like, wow, like this was completely unexpected. So that was the first thing. The second thing, I had a few years of high school English in me, enough to have basic conversation, but not enough to take economic classes, right? Or like, I don't know, accounting classes, business classes, the level...
High level stuff.
Yeah, the level of my vocabulary was not extended enough to actually take college classes with it, And so, I had traveled a lot. And when you play golf, in any other country, you speak English, but the level, like the communication that you have with other players is like, hey, you had a 3, I had a 4, and like, good shot, okay, great, where are you from, whatever. It's like very basic English. And I think one of my first or second class, I got in an argument with the math teacher because I didn't staple my homework. And he gave me a 0.
Oh, really?
And I went to see him and I was like, I don't understand. Because I'm also like, I was pretty advanced in math, especially with high school. And in Europe, math is like very pushed and stuff. So that math homework was like so easy. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong in this homework. Why do I have 0? It's like, you didn't staple it. And I was like, I don't know what that is.
Oh,
it's
really?
like, you didn't staple it. And it's like, I do not know what that means. And then he grabbed these staples. He's like,
he like doesn't believe you.
And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't know what that was. I'm sorry. But like, and then I realized, I was like, okay, this is going to be a lot harder to handle than I had anticipated. Thankfully, I started classes. So my first year I would do full on math. So then it would be less language, or communication and English 101. Okay. Just to like kind of get into less high vocabulary, that kind of stuff. Because after that, I got into, economics, supply chain management, international business, that kind of stuff that involved a lot more
communication skills.
Communication skills, vocabulary, writing skills, that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely.
marketing, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Well, and that's, that's a crash course way to learn a new language, right? They say immerse yourself in a new language. Not only did you do that, but you're taking classes that me, as a lifelong English speaker, probably would have had a difficult time understanding
Studying,
as well.
yeah.
So
I would literally translate the entire thing in French first.
Really?
With my dictionary, and then study it in French.
Okay.
And then at the test, retranslate the French into English.
Wow.
So it would take me twice the time to do anything, right?
You should have got an honorary degree in translating or whatever the degree would be called, because that's when you're doing that, you strike me as the person that you set your eyes on a vision, you figure out what exactly you want to do, and you just execute, and there's really no other option. Maybe I'm wrong, of course sometimes you do fail with things, but are you the kind of person that just puts your head down and gets stuff done? Yeah, it
100%.
seems like it.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because not only based on everything that you've described before, but also looking at these pastries, which we'll talk about more in a minute here, but even the reels that you've been posting on Instagram. So for anyone that doesn't follow you, you guys are churning out some of the funniest, most entertaining, definitely the funniest, most entertaining bakery reels that I've ever laid my eyes on. But really kind of, taking that as a way to grow your brand and educate people, and also have fun with your consumers.
Yeah. And
people have really, really responded to it. And so, as you're going through learning a new language and getting through college, how are you dealing with that? Not to get too personal, but on a day where you're translating something back and you find a mistake or something like that, what is kind of the shining light that pulls you through?
So my first semester was really hard, really, really hard. And there's a lot of little things that I would say that I didn't realize the way they came off. So I would say fine for a lot of things. Fine, as in good, right? If you translate from a dictionary, fine is good. So everyone's like, how are you today? I'd be like, fine. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Oh my God, why she's, And so I didn't have great relationship with my teammate, which was really hard, because I was not only really competitive, I wanted to do good, but I also was like, I don't have any friends.
Sure.
You guys are all I got here. I don't have family. I have nothing. And anything that I would say with a certain word or a certain tone would be misinterpreted, only because I didn't know how else to say things.
The very nuanced version of a language barrier, where it's not only being able to understand, but
they'd be like, what's up? And I'd literally be looking up and be like, I don't know, and they'd be like, no, what's up with you? And I'm like, I don't know what that means. But it's you get very self-conscious, right? Because you're already this is already really hard. I'm working twice as hard to get through anything that should be pretty simple. And here I am not even understanding what's up, right? Or so it was difficult. So the first semester was probably the hardest. Okay. And then you just have that kind of breaking point where your brain just finally clicks. You finally start so when you learn a new language, you constantly translate in your head, right? So I want to say good morning. In my head, I'm going to think it in French, translate it good morning, and then suddenly I can be like, good morning.
Yes.
Right? But there's that one moment where your brain finally clicks, and when you mean good morning, you're just like, good morning.
Sure.
You don't translate anymore because you mean in English. For example, a great example is a phone number. My phone number in America, I know it in English.
Okay.
So if I speak with a French customer and they ask for my phone number, I would not be able to tell them in French, just because I've always, my brain retrained it in English. But there's some point in your learning curve where you retain a translation. You don't retain a message, right? And so I think through my second semester, finally I clicked. I would still need my dictionary for a certain word, but I finally clicked and started thinking English. And that saved me a lot of energy, because I was constantly translating in my head, constantly. And then we played a golf game with my team. At that point, I don't recall being friends with any of my teammates at that point after the first semester. But we played a golf game. and it was a silly golf game, and they all plotted against me on the golf game, right? And I turn around and I go, "Can we curse on this podcast?"
Yes, absolutely.
Right. I was like, "You all are bitches," and everyone just cracked up.
Yeah.
And they were like, "You're actually funny," and I was like, "Yeah, I just don't know how to like communicate it." And suddenly,
Sure.
like the whole like guard, because I was very defensive too, because I was constantly translating, constantly like trying to analyze the way you talked. So people would be like, "Why is she looking at me like this?" And
Sure.
analyzing everything I do. And I'm like, because I have no way to understand you any other way, right?
Yeah.
And so finally the facade kind of fell, and they were like, "Oh, this chick's actually cool,"
Yeah.
right? And so suddenly became like the experience
Okay.
completely shifted. We became best friend. I finally started like actually communicating English. I would still need my dictionary for like bigger words, new words, that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
basic communication was a lot
I need
easier.
a dictionary every once in a while as well, so no shame in that.
I know. It's like sometimes I'm just like, what does this word means? And then they became my best friends, and it was just Boise were some of the best years of my life. I really enjoyed
Nice.
it. Yeah, it was awesome. So.
Well, and so I began with the question of, how are you getting through these hard times? And a lot of it sounds like just finally being able to connect with people as well. And so you have your husband who was from Prescott. So describe to me what brought you to Arizona. And then you touched on it a little bit, but once you get to Arizona, what is your journey like to where we are now?
He wanted to relocate here. He was still playing golf professionally at the time.
Okay.
So the weather is a lot better here.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved back, and I was recruited by Silverleaf, and I said, "Hey, it's a good opportunity for me to move here and for us to be together." I did consider the option at some point to maybe both of us going back to Boise, just because I loved that city, and I still had some friends there. And again, I was starting my life again here, not knowing anybody. At least this time I have the language, but starting my life again from zero, essentially. And I said, "Okay, let me just work and see if I like living here and see where this is going." And after a year, I believe, here, I would just be like, I really miss like a butter croissant. I really want like a good baguette. I just really miss the things that I was doing in France and eating every day and that kind of stuff. I was like, I really wish I could like have one of those right now. And so I started like looking around, trying to find like small bakers, because obviously a French patisserie didn't exist, but I was trying to find like, is there any other French people and that kind of stuff. And that's where I started looking into farmers market. So more and more you'd see like home bakers at farmers market that would do some sourdough loaves and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of how I got in contact with the whole farmers market world in America. It's pretty big in Europe, but and then I said, okay, well, I can't find it. I'm going to make it. So then I started myself being at farmers market and selling my products, and then we kind of grew from there.
And around what year is it that you start digging into farmers markets?
2018.
2018.
Yeah.
Okay. And so did you launch with just a handful of products? What were some of the things you were selling at that time?
At the farmers market, we had sourdough loaves, we had cookies, brownies, muffins, and then I would do my Thanksgiving pies. And then I would promote the fact that I could cater like a certain event for pastries and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And so once you start doing the farmers markets, I assume that's a major change or something very new for you. What was that experience like?
It was fun. I wasn't really doing it for money, because when you're small home bakers, it's not really about the few $100 that you're going to make at the market, especially that then you have to pay the market fee and buy your ingredients, and then you were up all night baking this stuff. It was more so to just do something for myself and be out there and have my product and offer it to the people and meet new people. And the farmers community was like really, really, really nice. So you have other farmers at the market that just get to know, and it was more so to be like part of something bigger, but do that for myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
well,
I really
it
like
is
that.
very much a community, right?
It is, yeah.
Not only, is it a community of people that are coming there that are typically around that area that are coming to experience it, but also you develop relationships, like you're saying, with the other vendors there. Yeah. And Arizona, from what I understand, I've never, run something like that, run a farmer's market stand. But of course, I work with people like yourself that have done it before or doing it currently. And whether it be the farmers markets or restaurants or collaborations, like we'll dig into one that you did recently, Arizona seems to be very unique in that sense, that people are very welcoming. And that must have been a very, pleasant experience for you, I would assume,
yes,
as you start to build those relationships and settle back into Arizona. What was it like living here at that point? Were you kind of falling in love with the state? Are you in love with the state now?
Well, the state is big. Mm-hmm. You mean Arizona or
Arizona,
the states
yes.
as in the United States?
The state of Arizona.
The state of yes. I like it. I think it's an incredible place to live. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're really lucky.
I agree.
Yeah, everything's accessible. The way of life is just, it's really good. There's no snow. Like, seriously, that's nice.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you can't find all the products all the time. Yes, the food is, sometimes not from here. Mm-hmm. That's part of the challenge. But at the end of the day, I think it's really an incredible place to be in. And I wouldn't say I was in love, but I was like, yeah, this is a cool place. Let's keep building our life here. I wasn't, at no point was I like, no, we need to find a plan to get out of here. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is great. Let's find a plan to make it work here.
Absolutely. So walk me through how farmers markets takes the next step, which I assume is opening up your brick and mortar.
Yeah. I don't know. I just did it.
Yeah. Well, so you must have been selling lots of pastries and whatnot at the farmer's market, I assume.
Not even.
Really?
No. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so successful. I must have a brick and mortar. I was just kind of like, well, are we going to do this or what?
Yeah,
let's
sure.
do it. It was kind of like, quit it all and let's go. Let's go all in, or, because at some point it's kind of like, yeah, I love the farmer's market and I would continue to do it. But then also, what are you working towards? Mm-hmm. You just do that to have something on Saturday morning to do? Sure. I didn't originally. I did that because of the community. I did that because, wanting to meet people and wanting to be part of that. I didn't do it because what else am I going to do on a Saturday? I was working Saturday nights, at my other job. I did it because I was like, I want to do this. But then at some point you're like, okay, well, what am I working towards? I was like, my bakery. Okay, well then let's do it. Mm-hmm. I was like, let's quit it all and let's do it.
Well, and it sounds very matter of fact, and that's what you're describing now, and that kind of seems like it fits into your personality, right? You have a clear vision, and then it's just at that point, how do we execute now? And so, walk me through the opening. What was the reception? Were there any big hurdles to get over that you didn't quite anticipate, despite going to school for business and studying, at a place like Le Cordon Bleu?
Everything.
Everything surprised you?
Everything.
Yeah.
It's like, it was so hard. Everything. Finding the right place. And then it didn't work out. And then just like you imagine being in this place and you're like, never mind, find a new one. And then finding the right place again and then going through construction. I'm young, I'm a female, I'm petite, and people in construction talk to me like I knew nothing. Mm-hmm. I was completely disrespected.
Really?
And it was just kind of so hard not to be stepped on by the contractors, not the landlord. The landlord here was awesome. Okay. But usually the contractors, the construction workers, the equipment sellers, nobody would take me seriously. Mm-hmm. Or did have comments like, oh, well, maybe you should have your husband call me back. And I'm like, my husband has nothing to do with this. Sure. I'm talking to you right now. Mm-hmm. And that was really hard. And I don't really have a big ego, so it's not like my ego was hurt, but it was like, I'm trying to get something done here.
Absolutely.
Either be on board or move on, but at some point you're like, I need someone to be on board, mm-hmm. And so you accept certain things because you feel like you don't really have a choice. Sure. And I mean, even today with the 2 stores that we have, sometimes I meet contractors that talk to me like I know nothing. Mm-hmm. And I'm just kind of like, they're like, do you even know that you would need a floor drain? And I'm like, yeah, I know that, you know, but it's like constant, trying to minimize me a little bit because they don't think that I know, or
you're battling to run a business. The last thing you need to be battling is the people that are trying to help you do that, or supposed to be helping you do that.
And don't take me wrong, a lot of people help me.
Sure.
A lot of people help me, but it for the construction of my very first place, it felt like 90% of my battles were to just be heard and be working towards a goal with someone that was on board with me. And yes, some people were extremely supportive, extremely helpful, but I did a lot of it myself. The epoxy I did myself, the FRP I did myself. Like anything I could do myself, I'd literally go to Home Depot and I'd be like, how do you epoxy something? You know, and they'd be like, oh, you have to put this chemical. And I was like, all right, let's buy it, let's go.
Sure.
And then next time, like, I'm like, okay, I know that never again in my life I will put epoxy on the floor. Okay. No matter how much it costs. Yeah. But I know how to do it. So then I hired someone to do epoxy, and he's talking to me like, well, you need to do, and I was like, no, you don't. I've done it before. You don't need to do that. This is what I want. Do we want to have the job or not? And they're like, oh, yeah. You know, and they're trying to like fool me into paying more, or tell me that I need something that I don't, or something like that. I'm like, I know I won't do it again, but I also know how to do it. So you can't convince me what I need or don't need or whatever. And so it was an incredible learning curve.
Absolutely.
Like, it's things like you can't learn in a textbook. You just got to go and do it, right?
That's what I was thinking in my head. You know, you not only had to learn the language of English, and then on top of that, you were learning the language of, you know, the technical, theoretical side of business and management and whatnot. You know, here are these concepts. Here's how to do accounting, the mathematics language there. But then on top of that, you also are tasked with learning the language of day-to-day operations and dealing with people like contractors. And not only, you know, here's what I want, here's how I'm going to explain it, but also, you know, developing the confidence, or maybe confidence wasn't an issue, but just the ability to execute what you want and kind of navigate people who aren't making it easy for you.
Absolutely. Because if you've never done it and they're like, yeah, you need this and this is how much it costs, and you have no idea and you feel like your back's against the wall, you're like, well, okay, let's do it. But once you actually know, you're like, no, this is not how much it costs. You're taking advantage of me. And it happens a lot. But there's some point in your life where you can gain the confidence and the knowledge to be like, this is not correct. Yeah. So I won't be working with you moving forward, because I know I have other options that are a lot more respectful, you know. And so it's still hard. It still sometimes happens to me that I feel that I'm put in that position. So I'm not always like, I'm so powerful now, I can say no to anything that but I do have more confidence to do that now that I've experienced it and gone through it for 3 years.
Yeah, well, and you know, that's one of the reasons why I think being a business owner it's not necessarily for everyone, but if it is for you and it's something you decide to invest in, I think there's very few things that you can do in life that are going to help you grow more as a person. And when you're running a business, it's like whatever problem that pops up is ultimately your responsibility. Maybe you can delegate it, but if you delegate it and it doesn't get done or doesn't get done properly, ultimately it falls back on you.
But when you delegate it, you must delegate it with a solution.
Exactly.
Right? So you must already acknowledge or anticipate the plan of action. You can't just be like, here's my problem, you know, and then fix it. You know, that's not how it works, because it's your business.
Sure.
And I think a true personality, trait of character that you must have to run a business is that you need to be able to deal with problems.
Absolutely.
It's not possible, if you own businesses, to not run into a problem daily.
That almost is what a business is just constantly solving problems.
Absolutely. And if you don't like the challenge of being like, cool, your problem, what are my solution? A, B, C, D. Let's go with B. This is the plan of action. You can't handle it. And also that was one of my challenge when I opened this bakery, is I didn't really have clicked in that mindset immediately, where I was like, I just don't want to have problems. And now I'm like, if I don't have a problem a certain day, I'd be like, that's a problem. Yeah. It's a problem not to have a problem. You know, it's kind of like when you have children and suddenly it gets all quiet and you're like, something's wrong, you know, it shouldn't be quiet. And so I think that was also the mindset that I had to get into, that problems are going to happen. That's literally what your life is now.
Absolutely.
And you just got to learn to manage it and delegate, sure, but you got to delegate with a plan of action. So.
Well, and to kind of, bring it full circle with the statement I was making as far as running a business is one of the biggest things that can push personal growth forward. Not only is that kind of what business is solving problems, but that's really life in general, right? You're going to constantly be forced problems on your plate. And how do you deal with those problems? So you get this spot open. I figure things go pretty well because that translates into another spot. Talk about some of the products. No? Okay.
No.
Well, so dig into some of the products that you offer, and then we'll dig into the new spot a little bit as well. But we've got a plate here in front of us for those watching. Kind of talk about these and some of your other popular items as I bite into this caramel pistachio cookie. Is that what this
pistachio cookie. This is one of our bestseller. It's so good. I would eat it every day if I could.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good. So we do some tarts. We have what we call entremet, which is a style of cake, usually with a mousse. So we have a mango passion fruit one, and we have a pistachio chocolate one. We sell macarons as well. In terms of pies and tarts, we try to stay somewhat seasonal. So November, December, we'll have like pumpkin pecan, apple streusel, that kind of stuff. As we lead into springs, we'll have, either a grapefruit, we have a lemon meringue, which is very popular. Mixed berries is coming back in season now that the berries are getting back in season. And then we're also really, really known for everything that's boulangerie-wise, which is going to be croissant, viennoiserie, almond croissant, chocolate, pain au chocolat, and then all of our breads. So we have baguette, and then we have sourdough breads. So
I'm realizing now that I'm never going to be able to pronounce all of those different pastries properly. So you really have like a pastry lover's dream spread, which is to be expected, of course. But, when I walked in and saw the case, there was a European woman looking at it, and her eyes she was glowing because she had not seen something like that. She mentioned that her husband was French, and she was inquiring, and you could tell she felt so at home. So
I love that.
I'd like to hear you talk to kind of, what it was like bringing these things that, Americans understand a lot of this stuff, but maybe not in the way that you have it laid out, so traditionally beautifully done with such precision. And then also, having people come in and connect with it, that they grew up with that exposure to it. What is that like as you are running the business?
So right now it feels amazing because that's what I've wanted to do from the beginning. But originally, to go back to like one of the little statement I just made, is when we opened, we didn't necessarily have customer coming in specifically looking for that. It was a lot of just foot traffic trying to get known, and then it would come in and everyone would be like, oh, you don't sell cupcakes, and then it would so I would constantly question myself, and I'm like, okay, well, I have a perfect lemon meringue pie that's like France. And she's like, oh, well, I was looking for cupcakes. This is an example, but I would constantly be like, oh, should I get into cake pops, or think a bit more Americanized, and I'm like, oh, you should do beignets, or you should do this. And so it was really hard, only because we weren't known enough, broadly enough for people to be like, this is the spot to find this. So we really had to put like our foot down into our identity, right? And we'd get comments all the time by people that were looking for something else. And so it was a little bit hard. And then the second location just kind of fell in my lap. They were customers of mine, and they're like, we have the perfect spot for you. And I'm like, I just opened this one. And they're like, sure. Yeah, but we have the perfect spot for you. And I went to see it, and I fell in love with the place, and I was like, this is the place. I want it. Like, let's do it. And my husband was like, you're crazy. Like, we've just went through 6 months of crazy construction, you being stressed. We barely just opened the door, and you're going into a second one. I was like, yeah. So we just went into Phoenix without Scottsdale being what it is yet. And we just need to have more presence and have more people know about us. And then literally 2 months later, COVID hit, and we're like, cool. Yeah. Perfect timing.
Well, and so you mentioned before we talked about how being a business owner, you have to have the mentality either set in place, or you're going to find out very quickly that your job is now to solve problems. And I think another part of what makes a person built out to be an entrepreneur or a business owner is that they willingly put more problems on their plate with, of course there's stress and things surrounding it, but with a willingness to solve more problems and then add more and solve more. And once you build a system for putting more problems in place, and then the system helps solve those problems or creating new systems to make that flow happen, that's when things really start to kind of get fun. So at what point do you transition over from, of course there's still battles to this day, but is there a point that you kind of feel like, maybe you go home and I'll say you take the apron off or whatever it may be, and you just go, we're making this happen?
When did it happen?
If it did happen, is there a day that, or a moment that you recall, or even just kind of a phase that you were going through that maybe you were getting settled in here and you're just like, it's kind of becoming what I wanted it to be?
It is. So in terms of the quality of the products that we have, I've had this feeling for probably a year. So then we got hit with COVID, right? So then we had to completely break down our team, and we went through this whole phase, and then we started regrowing again. And then it was the first holiday, not ready for it at all, because we're like, is it still going to be COVID? Are people going to celebrate? So and then next thing you know, people ordered, and we're like, oh my God, we weren't ready. Yeah. So it's just a constant, just keeping up. And I never had time to actually take the apron off and be like, this is what we've done. So I never had this moment where I would just sit down and reflect on what we've had rebuilt from COVID. But I would say that probably September of 2021, when we started getting ready for that season, that we were going to be like, okay, this time we're going to plan ahead.
Sure.
Let's start anticipating. Let's have the team ready for it, and let's have all of that. And I think I don't want to say that I took my apron off. I was like, wow, but I felt confident truly in my product, my team, which was huge. Just the confidence in you people makes everything. That you're like, we can freaking do this.
Yeah.
Whatever's gonna happen this season, we can do it. And I trust them, and I believe them, and they care, and they're the best people ever. And I think the proudest, some of those little sparks of moments is sometimes when I pull up on the Saturday morning at 3 a.m. and there's 10 cars parked in the parking lot, and they're all for the bakery, and you're like, all those people care so much about the products that we do that they're going to be here at 3 a.m. to bake it for the day, and you come in and everything looks awesome, and you're like, this is freaking cool. I would do anything for those people because they're making my dream come true. This is so cool that they want to be part of that. So it's not like I go home, I take it off, and I'm like, I did it.
Yeah.
It's I come in and I'm like, wow, those people are incredible. This product came out incredible. This is cool. And that's more so a moment for me than looking back or looking at the books or anything like that.
Well, that's kind of what I was looking for, is for a moment like that really, meant a lot. Because if you look at what you were describing about your first year in college, right? Part of the stress and, what was making the experience not as enjoyable is the lack of connection with other people, and kind of with a thing that other people might connect with, right? You loved golf. People around you loved golf, but because you weren't able to connect with them, it didn't bring you as much joy as it did once you made that connection. And so, those moments can be here 1 second and gone the next. As a business owner, I assume you probably have that moment and then wake up the next day or 15 minutes later, something pops up, and it's a fleeting moment. But those are some of the most joyful moments. It
makes everything worth it. It really truly does. Because sometimes I bake overnight, or something happens with the oven. Something always happens, right? But then it's but this is what I do it for, you know. And it's I can deal with any problem because I got those incredible people. I got this incredible product. I have incredible customer, like you said, connection. And then they come in on Saturday. There's a line at the door. Everyone's like, oh my God, hi Jenna. It's so cool. We build a community. The amount of French people that met each other through our bakery,
really?
This is so cool. And so, it makes it worth it. And I'm just whatever problems that we need to go through, I'm just let's just go through it. And now I have people, I have a team, I have a community that I can rely on to help me get through those problems. So,
even to take it to that next level, like you're saying, not only were you able to connect with your team, but now your business is serving as a place where other people make those connections that can, be life-changing. And it's centered around food. And that's one of the reasons why I love food and beverage so much is it drives a lot of those interactions. and reminds people of the culture that they grew up with and allows new people to be exposed and forges new relationships. And that's one of the beautiful things about the industry. So with that said, I kind of want to dig into some of the things that you've got going on more recently. If I'm not mistaken, you did a collab with a local brewery.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that and maybe some other things that you have going on right now.
So I'm from Belgium, so obviously a lot of beers, although I don't drink personally.
Okay.
But my husband's a bit like, he likes beers and stuff. He's part of a beer club and whatnot. And Ren is an incredible brewery here. And
Wren House over in Phoenix, and now they actually have their production facility in Prescott as well, which is a cool little tie-in for you.
So I don't know how the whole collab came together. I think Scott, my husband, had a lot to do with that. I think he just kind of make the network and the communication happen, and then next thing you know, he was like, we need a ton of chocolate pistachio croissant for our next beer, and I was like, all right, let's go. And we just showed up with a ton of stuff, like you mentioned in the previously in podcast. I have a lot of reels and TikToks and whatnot, so I was like, let's go there, let's do a bunch of TikToks, let's get the croissant in there, and let's do a super cool beer collab. And it was a lot of fun. They're really, really good people. So
yeah, well, and we touched on it before that it runs kind of throughout the food industry and beverage industry, but craft beer is like one of the coolest industries I've ever dealt with. The amount of collaboration between not only different breweries, which would, in any other industry be competition, sometimes very fierce competition, breweries collaborate all the time. And I don't think many people realize how unique and special that is. And then also to be able to connect with someone like you. And do you remember, was it a pastry stout? Is that what the beer was?
Yeah, it was a stout, yeah.
Yeah, so that's just so cool. And, I don't know if stuff like that is happening over in France, because craft beer in Arizona, or not in Arizona, in the United States it's so innovative in the last, 10 years. Places are popping up all the time. And so for you, doing things on the level that you're doing, be able to connect with Wren House, who's just won GABF gold medal for Spellbinder, that to me is like why Arizona is so cool unique for food and beverage. What tell me a little bit more about what that experience was like. Was it very unique for you, or was it kind of just getting in there and knocking all the work out?
I think I think what I really felt, me individually and selfishly, is that like I'm growing my community. Yeah. Like those are really cool people and they want me to be with them. Heck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me when to show up, I'll be there. And then that was like a really feel good moment for me to I know I have a lot of customers and I know we're doing really good, but for other big people that I look up to be acknowledging me and be like, hey, we want to work with you. I'd be like, what? Okay. Yeah. So I thought that was me personally, that was a very cool moment. The process, they took on most of the process. So they made it really easy for me. I just had to show up with my pastries and that's it.
And a phone, of course, to record some TikToks
and the phone to record some TikToks and mess around with them. But it's not like I had to work or anything.
They weren't making you scoop grain out or anything like that.
I did it because I wanted. I'm fascinating. I love learning stuff, especially food. So I'm not just okay, that's it. There you go. Bye. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Where is that going next? How long? How many minutes? What's degree?
Beer is, for a person like you, beer is a very unique thing because like baking, it has to be extremely precise. And there's also a high level of science involved in it. Processes that are created, but it's also fun and creative because you get to come up with new recipes and use pastries from a local patisserie in your beers. So that must have been an incredible experience.
I think it took them 3 times the time to just do anything they normally do because I was like, can I do it? What are you doing next? How about that? Can I do it? And they were like, sure. And it's just I want to do that. Can I? And then they're like, I'm like, when are we canning it? And I'm like, I don't know. We'll let you know. 2 days later, so are we canning it? And they're like, no, not yet. We'll let you know. I'm like, a week later, so are we canning it? And it's like, we'll text you. And I was like, okay. And then they text me. I was like, I'll be right there. And then I show up, and then the can guy's setting up, and I'm like, what's this? What are you doing? It's just dude, I'm just setting up my can system. I was like,
they send you the text, and as soon as they click send, you're just sitting there ready to go. Yeah. Looking through the door. Yeah, that must have been a lot of fun. And I unfortunately didn't get to try that, but I'm sure it was a fantastic beer. Is there anything else similar to that or any other special projects, maybe some new seasonal products that you guys are launching soon that you want to talk about?
So right now we're in Easter mode,
Sure.
because it's next week. So it's we're really into Easter mode. No other collab in the plan right this second, although I'm open to it. We also did a few things with Little Miss Barbecue for their Christmas package.
Okay.
They offered quiches of ours, so that was pretty cool
I
too.
mean, you're just working with like some of the best people in Arizona.
I know.
No big deal.
Yeah, it's super cool. And what else? I don't know.
So when you say Easter mode, are there specific products that you're offering right now for Easter?
So we have all of our like pastries or classic gam, like original pastries. Easter is really, really big on brunches.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a ton of quiches and croissant and all that kind of stuff. We do work often with Little Miss, again, with their bacon, because their bacon is so good.
Mm-hmm.
They smoke their own bacon. So we try to do that with them. And yeah.
I mean, now I'm incredibly hungry. I was hungry before, but when you said bacon and the quiches, smoked, I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it's really good.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with
course.
us. It was incredible to hear your story, and I'm very glad that you're set up here because I'm just a little bit up the road. So now I've got a new spot to go to for
I love
all
that.
of my delicious baked goods. Looking at what is in front of me right now, I'm going to need at least one of all of them to bring home with me and enjoy. So once again, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.